I 35F need to share what happened in my family, as the situation has finally reached its conclusion. Growing up as the younger sibling to my brother Thomas of 40M, in what appeared to be a traditional American family, I always knew I was second best. Our parents, 65F, 68M, raised us in a suburb of Boston, where my father William built his real estate business from the ground up, and my mother Margaret maintained our family's social standing with an iron grip. From an early age, the pattern was clear. Thomas was the golden child, destined to take over the family business, while I was the afterthought. Despite this, I worked hard, graduated from an Ivy League business school, and secured a position as an executive candidate at a global corporation. My brother, meanwhile, started his own company in our hometown, married Victoria, 38F, from a prestigious family, and became everything our parents had dreamed of. Our family maintained a tradition of weekly Sunday dinners, where my parents would showcase Thomas's latest achievements while barely acknowledging my career milestones. Victoria would sit there in her designer outfits, giving me condescending looks whenever I mentioned my work in corporate marketing. This dynamic persisted until that fateful family meeting 5 years ago. That family meeting changed everything. Mother had insisted everyone be present, even my husband Daniel, 36M, who usually avoided these gatherings due to the obvious tension. I thought it would be another typical Sunday of listening to Thomas's accomplishments, but I was wrong. "We've made an important decision about our will," Father announced, setting down his wine glass with an air of finality. "After careful consideration, we've decided that Thomas will inherit everything, the house, the lake house, all our assets and investments." The room fell silent. I felt Daniel's hand tighten around mine under the table. "Your brother has a family to support," Mother added, as if that explained everything. "He has responsibilities, a business to maintain, a position in society to uphold." Victoria smirked from across the table, adjusting her pearl necklace with perfectly manicured fingers. The gesture screamed, "I told you so." "And what about my future?" My voice came out steadier than I expected. "What about my potential family?" "Sophia, dear," Mother's tone dripped with condescension. "Let's be realistic. You chose a corporate career. You're hardly ever home. How could you maintain a proper family life?" 20 years of suppressed anger bubbled to the surface. "You mean like how you've maintained our family? By missing every significant moment of my life because Thomas had something more important happening? I was valedictorian in high school, you both skipped the ceremony because Thomas had a business seminar. I won the National Marketing Excellence Award last year, you said you couldn't attend because Thomas's company was hosting a charity gala. I've achieved everything on my own, without your support, while you've handed Thomas everything on a silver platter. That's unfair," Father's face reddened. "We've always supported both our children equally." "Really?" I pulled out my phone. "Let me read you something. I've kept a list, just for moments like this. March 15th, my piano recital, you attended Thomas's golf tournament instead. June 8th, my college graduation, you left halfway through because Thomas needed help with a business proposal. December 24th, the day I announced my promotion to senior executive, you spent the entire Christmas Eve dinner discussing Thomas's new office building." Victoria interrupted, her voice honey-sweet but laden with venom. "You're being dramatic, Sophia. This is exactly why you're not suited to handle significant inheritance. You're too emotional, too unprofessional. Thomas understands the responsibility that comes with wealth and status." I turned to her, years of accumulated resentment sharpening my words. "Interesting perspective from someone who's never worked a day in her life, Victoria. Tell me, is it hard to maintain your superiority complex while living entirely off my brother's achievements? How dare you?" Mother stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Victoria has been nothing but gracious to you. She's the daughter I never had." Those words hit like a physical blow. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never noticed before, the complete absence of maternal love in her eyes when she looked at me. "The daughter you never had?" I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "I've been here all along, Mother. I'm your daughter. I'm the one who graduated top of my class, who built a career from scratch, who's about to become the youngest CMO in my company's history. But none of that matters because I'm not Thomas, right? The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel stood up beside me, his presence steady and supportive. That's when Thomas finally spoke, his first words since the announcement. "Come on, Sophia, you're making a scene. This is about what's best for the family legacy. You know I'll take care of you if you ever need anything." Take care of me? I felt eerily calm now. Like you've been taking care of your company's financial records? Thomas's face paled slightly. I'd heard rumors through my business network about his company's questionable practices, though I'd kept that information to myself until now. What are you implying? Father's voice had a dangerous edge. Nothing yet. But maybe instead of worrying about your precious legacy, you should be more concerned about your golden boy's business practices. That's enough. Father slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal glasses rattle. If you can't be grateful for what this family has given you, perhaps you shouldn't be part of it at all. I stood up, smoothing my dress with deliberate care. You know what? You're right. I shouldn't be part of this family anymore. I've spent my entire life trying to earn love that was never going to be given freely. I'm done. Sophia, Mother's voice wavered slightly. Don't be ridiculous. Sit down and let's discuss this rationally. Rationally? I picked up my purse. Like how you rationally decided to write me out of your will. Or how you rationally missed every important moment of my life. No, Mother. I'm done being rational about this family's emotional abuse. Daniel and I walked toward the door. Behind us, I could hear Victoria's theatrical sobs and Mother's increasingly desperate calls. But it was Father's last words that sealed my resolve. If you walk out that door, don't expect to ever come back. I turned one last time, taking in the scene, my father's red face, my mother's trembling hands, Victoria's fake tears, and Thomas's uncomfortable shifting. Don't worry. I won't. That night, as Daniel and I sat in our home office, I began formulating a plan. I wasn't going to let them get away with this pattern of behavior any longer. My years in corporate strategy had taught me one thing: timing is everything. I started gathering information. Every questionable business decision Thomas had made, every social misstep Victoria had covered up, every instance of my parents turning a blind eye to their golden child's misdeeds. I built a detailed dossier, not out of spite, but as insurance. My corporate career continued to flourish. I secured my position as CMO, expanded my professional network, and built relationships with key players in both the business and social worlds. All while maintaining complete radio silence with my family. Occasionally, news would reach me through mutual acquaintances. Mother had been telling people I was going through a phase. Father had been bragging about Thomas's business expansion plans. Victoria had been hosting charity galas, positioning herself as the perfect society wife. I let them maintain their illusion of perfection. I knew it was only a matter of time before the house of cards would collapse. My sources had informed me that Thomas's company was built on increasingly shaky foundations. His aggressive expansion had been funded by creative accounting and questionable loans. For 2 years, I watched and waited. I focused on building my own success, supported by Daniel's unwavering love and understanding. We created the kind of home I'd always wanted, one filled with genuine affection and mutual respect. Then, just as I'd anticipated, the first cracks began to appear in Thomas's carefully constructed facade. His company's stock started to fluctuate wildly. Whispers of financial irregularities began circulating in business circles. Victoria's social invitations became less frequent. I knew it was time to execute the next phase of my plan. Through my network, I ensured that certain information about Thomas's business practices reached the right auditors. Not anything illegal, I didn't need to fabricate evidence. The truth was damaging enough. The investigation into Thomas's company was swift and thorough. The house of cards began to collapse. But I wasn't done yet. I had one more card to play. I made sure the family's involvement became public knowledge, how my parents had used their connections to help cover up early signs of trouble, how they had pressured local banks to extend risky loans to Thomas. Not enough to implicate them legally, but more than enough to tarnish their carefully maintained social standing. Then I waited for the inevitable. I knew they would come to me when everything else failed. And they did. I'd like to continue this story, but I need to take some time to gather my thoughts about what happened next. The next part involves their desperate attempt to rewrite the will in my favor, and how I handled that situation. I'll update soon with more details. For now, I want to thank all of you who've supported me through this journey. Your advice and encouragement have meant more than you know. Update 1, thank you for all the supportive messages on my last post. A lot has happened since then, and I need to share the latest developments. 3 months after my last post, my parents showed up unannounced at my office. I was in the middle of preparing for a major client presentation when my assistant messaged me about 2 people insisting on seeing me, my parents. Sophia, please, Mother's voice trembled as she stood in my office doorway, looking smaller than I remembered in her designer suit. We need to talk to you. I remained seated behind my desk, maintaining the power dynamic. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. It's about Thomas, Father said, his usual commanding tone notably absent. There's been developments. The developments were exactly what I'd anticipated. The audit had revealed systematic fraud throughout Thomas's company. The investigation had expanded to include potential money laundering charges. Victoria had fled to her family's estate in Europe, taking most of their liquid assets with her. We were wrong, Mother said, tears welling in her perfectly made-up eyes. We've come to make things right. Father pulled out a manila envelope. We've had our lawyer draw up new papers. We're changing the will. Everything will go to you, the houses, the investments, all of it. I felt a cold satisfaction. Not because of the offer, but because they were acting exactly as I'd predicted. When the golden child fell, they desperately needed a new success story to cling to. Why now? I asked, though I knew the answer. What changed? We've realized our mistake, Mother said, reaching for my hand across the desk. I pulled back before she could touch me. You've proven yourself. You're successful, stable, responsible. Unlike Thomas, I finished for her. Father shifted uncomfortably. Your brother has made some unfortunate choices. Has he? Or did he simply fail to hide those choices as well as he used to? With your help, of course. They exchanged guilty looks. I pressed on. Tell me, how much did you know about his business practices? How many times did you use your connections to smooth things over? How many auditors and regulators did you convince to look the other way? That's not relevant now, Father attempted to regain control of the conversation. What matters is that we're trying to make things right. I opened my laptop and turned it to face them. On the screen was a detailed document, every instance of their interference in Thomas's business dealings, every call they'd made to their contacts, every favor they'd called in. I've been gathering this information for years, I said calmly. Every time you chose him over me, every time you helped him avoid consequences, every time you enabled his corruption while dismissing my legitimate achievements. Mother's face went pale. How did you? I'm very good at my job, Mother. The job you never thought was worth acknowledging. I have connections too. I just use them more, ethically. Are you threatening us? Father's voice rose slightly. Not at all. I'm simply explaining why your offer means nothing to me. You're not offering me the inheritance because you've realized your mistake or because you suddenly value me. You're offering it because Thomas is no longer a viable option for preserving your precious legacy. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. My meeting is in 5 minutes. I'll have security escort you out. Sophia, please, Mother was openly crying now. We're still your parents. No, I replied, pressing the button for security. You're Thomas's parents. You made that very clear 5 years ago. I'm just the backup plan you never thought you'd need. As security led them away, Father turned back. You'll regret this. Family is all we have in the end. I smiled, thinking of Daniel, of our home, of the genuine relationships I'd built. That's where you're wrong. Family is what we choose, not what we're born into. After they left, I received a flood of messages from extended family members, all trying to convince me to reconcile. Some accused me of being cruel, of kicking my family while they were down. Others tried to guilt me with comments about family loyalty and forgiveness. But here's what they don't understand: this isn't about revenge. It's about finally breaking free from a toxic pattern that's existed my entire life. It's about refusing to be the backup plan for parents who only value success and social standing. I have more to share about what happened next, particularly about Thomas's attempt to reach out and Victoria's unexpected return, but I need to process those events first. I'll update again soon. For now, I want to thank this community for your continued support. Your messages and comments have helped me stay strong in my decisions. Update 2: Following my last update, the situation with my family took an unexpected turn. Victoria suddenly reappeared in Boston, not to support Thomas, but to add fuel to the fire. I was having lunch with my corporate team when I received an email from an unknown address. It was Victoria, and what she revealed stunned me. She'd been collecting evidence of Thomas's fraudulent activities for years, planning her own exit strategy. Now she was offering to share everything with me. "I want to make a deal," Victoria said when we met at a quiet cafe outside the city. She looked different, gone were the designer clothes and perfect makeup. Instead, she wore simple business attire and a determined expression. "Why should I trust you?" I asked, stirring my coffee. "Because I have proof that your parents were more than just enablers. They were active participants in Thomas's fraud scheme." She pulled out a USB drive. "Your father used his real estate connections to inflate property valuations for Thomas's company. Your mother's social connections helped hide the money trail through various charity organizations." I wasn't surprised by the information, but the level of detail Victoria had gathered was impressive. "Why are you doing this?" "Thomas tried to pin everything on me when the investigation started. Called me a gold digger who manipulated company funds without his knowledge. Your parents supported his story." Her laugh was bitter. "They never realized I was recording every family dinner, every private conversation, every strategy meeting for the past 3 years. The evidence was damning. Not only had my parents helped Thomas commit fraud, but they'd also actively worked to undermine my career in the early days." Victoria showed me emails where they'd contacted their friends in various companies, suggesting they not hire me or promote me. "They wanted to keep you dependent on them," Victoria explained. An independent, successful daughter didn't fit their narrative. I spent the next week reviewing everything Victoria had provided. With my corporate legal team's help, I verified the authenticity of every document, every recording, every piece of evidence. Then Thomas reached out. He showed up at my office, looking nothing like the polished businessman he'd once been. "Sophia, you have to help me," he pleaded. "Victoria's gone crazy. She's trying to destroy our family." "Our family?" I raised an eyebrow. "The same family that celebrated your every achievement while ignoring mine? The same family that conspired to hold back my career?" His face paled. "You know about that?" "I know everything, Thomas. Every manipulated valuation, every laundered donation, every call mother and father made to sabotage my career opportunities. They were trying to protect you," he attempted to defend them. "The corporate world is harsh." "No, they were trying to control me. Just like they controlled you. The difference is, I broke free." He slumped in his chair. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing," I replied calmly. "I don't need to do anything. Victoria's evidence is already in the hands of the investigators. Your own actions, and our parents' choices, will have their natural consequences." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Thomas's company's stock had been suspended from trading. The FBI had opened a formal investigation into the family's charitable foundation. "You could help us," Thomas said desperately. "Your reputation is still intact. You could speak up for us. Like you spoke up for me all those years?" Like you did when they wrote me out of the will? When they sabotaged my career? He had no response to that. The next few weeks were a blur of headlines. Prominent Boston family implicated in multi-million-dollar fraud. Society charity events under investigation. Real estate mogul's empire crumbles. My parents made one final attempt to reach me. They sent their lawyer with a new proposal. They would sign over everything to me immediately, not just as an inheritance, if I would help them maintain their social standing. I had my assistant return the documents unopened. Victoria's evidence eventually led to multiple indictments. Thomas was charged with fraud and money laundering. My parents were named as co-conspirators in the scheme. Their carefully built social empire crumbled overnight. I maintained my silence throughout the media storm. My company's board appreciated my professional handling of the situation, and my career continued to thrive. Daniel and I focused on our life, our real family, the one we chose, not the one we were born into. There's one final chapter to this story that I need to share, involving an unexpected meeting with Thomas in a very different setting. I'll update once I'm ready to tell that part. For now, I want to thank this community again for your support and understanding. Your messages have helped me stay true to my principles throughout this challenging time. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I believe it's time to share the final chapter of this story. Last week, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Thomas, calling from a rehabilitation facility where he's serving his house arrest sentence. Can we meet? His voice sounded different, humbled, perhaps even genuine. I need to talk to you, face to face. After discussing it with Daniel, I agreed to meet Thomas at the facility under the supervision of his counselor. Walking into the meeting room, I barely recognized my brother. Gone was the expensive suit, the arrogant posture, the condescending smile. Instead, I saw someone who looked human. Thank you for coming, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I've been doing a lot of therapy here, a lot of thinking about our family dynamics. Why did you want to see me, Thomas? I read the impact statement you submitted to the court, he began, fidgeting with his sleeve. About how our parents' favoritism affected you. About how I participated in diminishing your achievements. You were right about everything. He pulled out a worn notebook. I've been journaling as part of my therapy. Want to know what I realized? I was as much a victim of their expectations as you were, just in a different way. They put me on a pedestal so high that I couldn't admit when I was struggling. I couldn't ask for help without risking their disappointment. That doesn't excuse what you did, I said quietly. No, it doesn't. I'm not looking for excuses. I'm trying to understand how we got here. How I became someone who could justify fraud and manipulation. How our parents created this toxic environment where appearance mattered more than reality. He showed me his journal entries, detailed analyses of our childhood, our parents' manipulation, the pressure to maintain the perfect facade. It was strange seeing our shared history from his perspective. Victoria visited me last month, he continued. She's agreed to testify about everything, not for immunity, but because she wants the truth out. She's in therapy too. I hadn't expected that. How are you handling that? Better than you'd think. The therapist here helped me see that our marriage was just another performance in our parents' grand show. We were both playing roles they assigned us. As we talked, I learned more about how our parents had manipulated Thomas throughout his life. Every achievement had come with strings attached. Every success had to be bigger than the last. The pressure had been crushing. But you know what's ironic? He gave a sad laugh. You're the one who actually achieved everything they wanted, success, independence, integrity, but because you did it on your own terms, they couldn't see it. During our conversation, a staff member brought in a local newspaper. The headline caught my eye: prominent Boston couple sells historic family home amid scandal. They're selling the house? I was surprised despite everything. They have to. Legal fees, restitution payments, they're losing everything. Mom called yesterday, asking if I knew anyone who might help. She still doesn't get it. She's more worried about losing their social status than facing the consequences of their actions. Thomas looked at me intently. Did you know they tried to get me to blame everything on Victoria? Said it would keep the family name intact if we painted her as the mastermind. That sounds like them, I replied, remembering their attempt to buy my loyalty with the inheritance. I refused, he said quietly. For the first time in my life, I refused to play their game. Maybe that's why I'm really here, to tell you I finally understand. I understand why you walked away 5 years ago. As our meeting drew to a close, Thomas asked one final question. Do you think there's any chance we could have some kind of relationship in the future? Not as the golden child and the scapegoat, but just as siblings? I considered his question carefully. I don't know, Thomas. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. But maybe we can start with honesty and see where that leads. After leaving the facility, I drove to our old neighborhood. The family home had a "for sale" sign out front. Through the window, I could see Mother directing movers, her hair now visibly gray, her posture less regal than I remembered. Father stood in the driveway, watching his life's work being dismantled. He saw me in my car but didn't approach. Instead, he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, perhaps the closest thing to an acknowledgement of defeat I'd ever see from him. I drove home to Daniel and our peaceful life. We've built something real, something based on mutual respect and genuine love. No facades, no manipulations, no impossible expectations. Last week, I received a letter from Victoria. She's started working with a nonprofit that helps victims of financial abuse. She's using her experience to help others recognize and escape toxic family dynamics. In her letter, she apologized for her role in our family's dysfunction and thanked me for indirectly helping her find her own path to redemption. As for our parents, they've moved to a small condo in Florida. Mother no longer hosts charity galas or sits on social committees. Father's business contacts have evaporated. They're living the very life they spent decades looking down on: ordinary, unremarkable, anonymous. Thomas will complete his house arrest in 6 months. He's already enrolled in online courses, studying psychology and family dynamics. He sends me his essays sometimes. I read them, not always responding, but acknowledging his efforts to understand our shared past. Looking back on everything that's happened, I realize this story isn't just about revenge or justice. It's about breaking free from toxic patterns, about finding the courage to define family on our own terms, about choosing truth over appearance. To everyone who's followed my story and offered support along the way, thank you. Your messages helped me stay strong when I doubted myself. You helped me see that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply stand our ground and let truth have its day. This will be my final update. The story of my family's downfall is ending, but my story, my real story, is just beginning. And this time, I'm writing it on my own terms.